When the alarm went off, everything changed. Blood on the concrete, headlights flashing, and a truth buried for years roared to life. He thought hitting me in that garage would teach me a lesson, but all he taught me was how to make him pay. The sound still echoes in my dreams, that piercing wail of the truck's alarm, cutting through his drunken rage like a blade through silence. That was the night I stopped being his victim. That was the night I became his reckoning. My name is Emily Carter, and I've spent the last 3 years learning how to disappear in my own home. 29 years old, grease under my fingernails, and bruises under my sleeves. That's who I'd become in Roy Benton's house. It started with such a small thing, a scratch. Nothing more than a hairline mark on the passenger side of his precious Ford F-150, barely visible unless you knew where to look. But Roy knew. Roy always knew. I'd been moving Mom's Honda out of the garage that afternoon, trying to make room for a transmission job I'd brought home from the shop. The sun was beating down on Clearwater like it had a personal vendetta against Texas, and sweat kept dripping into my eyes. My hand slipped on the gear shift for just a second, and the Honda's mirror kissed the F-150's paint job. The softest touch, a whisper of contact. I thought maybe he wouldn't notice. I thought wrong. The garage door rattled open at 6:37 p.m., and I heard his boots before I saw him. Heavy, deliberate. The kind of walk that announced Roy was home and the house better be ready for him. I was still under the Honda's hood, checking the coolant levels, when his shadow fell across the engine block. "What the hell is this?" His voice was already tight, wound up like a spring about to snap. I straightened up slowly, wiping my hands on my coveralls. He was standing by his truck, one finger pressed against the scratch like he was taking its pulse. "It's just a surface mark," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I can buff it out tomorrow at the shop." "You scratched my truck." Each word dropped like a hammer strike. His face was getting that particular shade of red that meant the bourbon was already working through his system. "My truck. Emily." "Roy, I said I'll fix it." The belt came off faster than I could track. One smooth motion, practiced and efficient, like he'd been waiting for an excuse. The leather cracked across my shoulder, and I stumbled backward into the workbench, tools scattered across the concrete floor. "You don't touch my truck." His voice bounced off the garage walls, mixing with the clatter of wrenches hitting concrete. "You don't breathe near my truck." I tried to stand straight, tried to meet his eyes the way I'd promised myself I would the next time this happened. But his fist was already coming, connecting with my shoulder, spinning me into the Honda's side mirror. Pain exploded through my ribs. "I'm sorry," I heard myself saying, hating the words even as they left my mouth. "Roy, please." "Sorry." He grabbed my arm, fingers digging into the exact spots where old bruises were still healing. "You're always sorry. Sorry doesn't fix my paint job." That's when it happened. When he shoved me against the F-150, my hip hit the door handle. The truck's alarm erupted into life, a piercing electronic shriek that filled the garage like a banshee's wail. The headlights started flashing, strobing white light across Roy's face, turning him into something from a nightmare there and gone. For a moment, he froze. The alarm kept screaming, and in that chaos of sound and light, something shifted in me. The fear that usually lived in my chest, that familiar weight that kept me small and quiet, suddenly felt different, colder, harder. Roy fumbled for his keys, cursing as he tried to shut off the alarm. When silence finally returned, my ears were ringing, but my mind was crystal clear. "Get out," he said, not looking at me. "Get out of my garage." I walked past him, careful not to brush against him, careful to keep my movements small and unthreatening. But as I reached the door to the house, I stopped. "Your dash cam," I said quietly. "The one you installed last month. It records when the alarm goes off." He turned to look at me, confusion flickering across his face. "Records everything," I continued. "Even inside the garage." I didn't wait for his response. I walked into the house, closed the door behind me, and went straight to my room. My shoulder was screaming. My ribs felt like they might be cracked, but my hands were steady as I pulled out my phone. The app connected immediately. Roy's dash cam, the one he'd bragged about to his drinking buddies, the one that supposedly would catch anyone who messed with his precious truck. He'd never changed the default password. He'd never realized it uploaded everything to the cloud. I watched myself on the screen, watched him take off his belt, watched his fist connect with my shoulder, watched the whole thing from the perfect angle, the camera catching everything in high definition. The alarm was still echoing in my ears, but now it sounded different, not like a warning, like a war cry. The next morning, Mom was already in the kitchen when I came down, moving around Roy like he was a piece of furniture she'd learned to navigate. He sat at the table, newspaper spread out, coffee steaming, looking for all the world like a normal suburban stepfather, not like a man who'd left bruises across my shoulder 12 hours ago. "Emily, honey," Mom said without looking at me. Roy mentioned there was an accident with his truck. I poured myself coffee, keeping my movements careful. The bruises were singing under my work shirt. "Just a small scratch. I told him I'd fix it at the shop." "You need to be more careful," she said, finally turning to face me. Her eyes skimmed over my face, never quite landing, never quite seeing. "You know how he is about that truck." Yes, I knew how he was. "Men and their vehicles," she added with a hollow laugh, like we were sharing some universal joke about masculine quirks instead of talking around the elephant of violence that lived in our house. "Just apologize properly, and it'll blow over." Roy rustled his paper. "Already blown over," he said, not looking up. "Emily knows she made a mistake." I drove to work in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Ramirez Auto was already humming with activity when I arrived, the familiar smell of motor oil and metal washing over me like a security blanket. This was my world, where things made sense, where problems had solutions that didn't involve keeping your voice soft and your movements small. "Carter." Jimmy called from under a lifted Chevy. "You're walking funny. Roy teaching you how to box again." The guys at the shop had their suspicions. They'd seen me come in moving stiff too many times, seen me flinch when someone raised their hand too fast. But in Texas, you didn't ask those questions directly. You made jokes and watched from the corners of your eyes and hoped the person would ask for help when they were ready. "Something like that," I said, sliding under a Toyota that needed brake work. The day passed in a blur of repairs and routine maintenance. My hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over while my mind went elsewhere. Every time I reached for a tool, my shoulder screamed. Every time I bent down, my ribs protested. But the pain was almost helpful. It kept me focused, kept me sharp. During lunch break, I sat in my car with my phone, scrolling through the video from Roy's dashcam for the 100th time. The quality was better than I'd hoped. Clear audio, perfect angle, his face visible when the light hit just right. I downloaded it to 3 different cloud services, emailed it to a dummy account, saved it on a USB drive I kept hidden in my locker. That evening, I stopped at CVS on the way home. The fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and overexposed as I stood in the first aid aisle, selecting supplies with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this before: arnica cream for the bruises, ice packs, heavy-duty concealer in my skin tone. The teenage cashier looked at my purchases, then at my face, and I saw the question forming. But she just scanned everything in silence, and I was grateful for that small mercy. At home, I started a journal, not a diary, something more clinical. Dates, times, descriptions, photos of injuries taken in my bathroom mirror with good lighting. I wrote everything in clear, simple language, the kind that would hold up in court. October 15th, 6:37 p.m. Roy struck me with his belt and his fist in the garage after discovering a minor scratch on his vehicle. Injuries include contusions to the right shoulder and possible rib fracture. Video evidence saved to multiple locations. I hid the journal behind the loose baseboard in my closet, along with the USB drives. My own little evidence locker that Roy would never think to look for because men like Roy didn't believe women like me had the spine to document anything. 3 days later, the bruises had turned that special shade of purple-green that made them easier to cover but harder to explain if anyone saw them. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 5 a.m., carefully applying concealer while Mom slept and Roy snored loud enough to shake the walls. This was my routine. This was my normal. Wake up, cover the bruises, go to work, come home, navigate around Roy's moods like they were landmines, go to bed, repeat. But now there was something else. The video on my phone, the journal in my closet, the cold, hard thing that had crystallized in my chest when that alarm went off. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was collecting, documenting, building something piece by piece, injury by injury. Roy thought he was teaching me lessons about respect, about knowing my place, about keeping my hands off things that didn't belong to me. But the only lesson I was learning was patience. Friday night, Roy had his poker buddies over, and the house reeked of bourbon and cigars. I stayed in the kitchen, making sandwiches and keeping the beer flowing, playing the invisible servant they all expected me to be. Their voices carried through the thin walls, getting louder as the empty bottles multiplied. "That's how you handle women." Roy's voice boomed over the others. "They get out of line, you remind them who's in charge. Simple as that." "Sandy giving you trouble." That was Pete from down the street. "Not Sandy, the other one." Roy's laugh was ugly, sharp. "Had to teach her about respecting a man's property. You should have seen her face when I took the belt off, like a deer in headlights." The laughter that followed made my stomach turn. I stood there, gripping the counter, listening to him brag about hitting me like it was some kind of accomplishment, like I was a dog he'd successfully trained. "That's my boy," someone said. "Can't let them think they run things?" "Damn straight," Roy agreed. I told her, "You scratch my truck, you deal with the consequences." Bet she won't touch it again. I walked to the doorway, tray of sandwiches in hand, and stopped just out of sight. Through the gap, I could see Roy holding court, beer in one hand, cigar in the other, playing the big man for his audience. "Emily," he barked suddenly. "Where are those sandwiches?" I stepped into the room, moving carefully between the chairs, setting the tray on the table. Roy's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist as I turned to leave. "See?" he said to his friends, his fingers tightening until I knew there'd be marks tomorrow. Obedient, like they should be. The men laughed again. I kept my face neutral, empty, the way I'd learned to do. But inside, that cold thing in my chest was growing colder. They left around midnight, stumbling to their cars, Roy slapping backs and making plans for next week. Mom had gone to bed hours ago, taking her sleeping pills and checking out of reality like she always did when Roy had been drinking. I was cleaning up the poker table when Roy came back inside, swaying slightly, eyes glassy and mean. "You were slow with the drinks tonight," he said. I kept them coming every... The slap came without warning, snapping my head to the side. My cheek burned, and I tasted copper. "Don't talk back to me." He grabbed the back of my neck, fingers digging in, and shoved me toward the wall. My shoulder, the same one he'd hit before, connected hard with the door frame. Pain exploded through my body, and I couldn't stop the cry that escaped. "Shut up," he hissed. "You want the neighbors to want them to know what a clumsy bitch you are." He raised his hand again, and I saw it coming this time, saw his fist forming, saw the trajectory it would take. But something in me finally snapped. The cold thing in my chest suddenly burned white hot. "You should have checked the dash cam before hitting me." The words came out steady, clear, cutting through his drunken fog. His hand froze mid-swing. "What?" I straightened up, meeting his eyes for the first time in years, really meeting them. "Your dash cam. The one in your truck. It recorded everything in the garage. Every word, every hit, everything." His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, anger, then something that might have been fear before it twisted back into rage. "You're lying." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone, though I didn't unlock it. Just held it up. Want to watch yourself using your belt on me. The audio is crystal clear. "You scratched my truck." Whack! "You don't touch my truck." Punch! Roy lunged for the phone, but I stepped back, and he stumbled, catching himself on the wall. "You little—" "I have copies," I said, backing toward my room. "Multiple copies, cloud storage, USB drives, places you'll never find them. So you're going to think very carefully about what you do next." His face was purple now, veins standing out on his forehead. "You threatening me in my own house." "No," I said, my hand on my bedroom door handle. "I'm done being threatened. There's a difference." I went into my room and locked the door, shoving my dresser in front of it for good measure. Roy pounded on it for a few minutes, cursing and threatening, but eventually, he gave up. I heard his heavy footsteps going to his and Mom's room, heard their door slam. I sat on my bed, shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. My cheek throbbed, my shoulder screamed, but underneath the pain was something else, something that felt almost like power. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder I'd been building. Videos, photos, audio recordings I'd managed to capture, and now, tonight, I had him on record bragging about hitting me, laughing about it, proud of it, I created a new document and typed at the top Project 412, our house number, the place where Roy thought he was king, but kings could fall, and I was going to be the one to push him off his throne. Saturday morning, I drove to the other side of Clearwater to meet Seth Coleman at a diner where Roy would never go. Seth was already there, uniform making him stand out among the truckers and early morning workers. We'd been friends since junior year of high school, back when I was still Emily with dreams and he was the kid who wanted to be a cop to actually help people. "Jesus, Em," he said when I sat down, his eyes catching on my cheek despite the concealer. "How bad is it this time?" I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. "Bad enough that I'm done." He watched the garage video in silence, his jaw tightening with each second. When it finished, he looked up at me with those cop eyes, the ones that saw everything and judged carefully. "You know I can arrest him right now with this." "No," I said, pulling the phone back. "Not yet. If you arrest him now, he'll make bail, come home, and Mom will take his side like she always does. I need more. I need enough that he can't wiggle out of it." Seth leaned back, studied me. "What are you planning?" "Emily." "Project 412, I said, and explained my documentation system, the Google Drive folder with its subfolders, videos, audio, photos, medical documentation, financial threats. But I need help getting evidence I can't access, such as the neighbors' security cameras, the ones facing our driveway, and I hesitated. His work emails. He uses his personal laptop for both, and when he's drunk, he sends me threats, tells me what he's going to do if I step out of line again, but he deletes them from his sent folder. Those emails still exist on the server," Seth said slowly, "but getting them legally—" "What if I could get him to forward them to me himself when he's drunk enough?" Seth shook his head. This is dangerous. If he figures out what you're doing, he won't." I pulled out a notebook, showing him my planning. "I've been watching him for years. I know his patterns. Thursday is poker night. He gets wasted. Saturday, he goes to the bar with his veteran buddies. Sunday, he passes out watching football. There are windows." "The neighbors' cameras," Seth said after a moment. "The Nguyens next door. Mr. Nguyen mentioned last month that they caught someone trying to break into cars. High-definition system. Saves everything for 90 days. If I told them we're investigating a pattern of domestic violence, they'd cooperate. Mrs. Nguyen doesn't like Roy. She's seen things." Seth pulled out his own notebook. "But Emily, if we're doing this, we do it smart, legal. Everything by the book so he can't claim entrapment or fabrication." We spent 2 hours planning. Seth would approach the neighbors officially, requesting footage for a routine investigation. I'd work on getting more audio, more video. We'd build a case so airtight that no prosecutor could ignore it. "There's something else," I said as we were leaving. "His veterans' benefits, his disability claim. He told the VA he injured his back in Afghanistan, but he told his drinking buddies he heard it in a bar fight in Dallas after he got back." Seth whistled low. "Fraud on top of assault. That's federal." That evening, I created the architecture of Project 412 properly. Main folder, encrypted, subfolders for everything. I uploaded the garage video to 3 different cloud services, each with different passwords. Created automated backups that would send everything to Seth if I didn't check in every 3 days. Then I got creative. I ordered tiny cameras online, the kind that looked like phone chargers. One for the living room, one for the kitchen. All connecting to my phone, all uploading automatically. I found an app that could record audio even when my phone screen was off, another that could transcribe conversations in real time. I went through my old medical records, scanning every emergency room visit, every mysterious injury I'd explained away as clumsiness. The documentation went back 2 years, a pattern clear as day to anyone who looked. But the masterstroke came when I was going through Roy's desk, looking for his VA paperwork. I found something else entirely: love letters. Not to Mom, to a woman named Cheryl in Austin. Recent dates, explicit content, photos. I took pictures of everything, careful not to disturb the placement. Roy, the big man who preached about respect and loyalty, was cheating on my mother. It wasn't violence, but it was leverage. Another piece of evidence that Roy Benton wasn't the upstanding veteran he pretended to be. By midnight, Project 412 had grown from a folder to a database. Evidence organized by date, by type, by severity. A timeline of Roy's violence that painted a picture no one could ignore. I sat in my room, door barricaded, looking at what I'd built. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a victim. Now I was an archivist of my own abuse, a collector of evidence, a strategist planning a war. Roy thought he'd won when he'd made me afraid. But fear could transform into something else if you let it get cold enough. Fear could become patience. Patience could become planning. And planning could become revenge. I opened a new document and started typing Phase 1 documentation in progress. Phase 2 legal consultation, scheduled Phase 3, execution pending. At the top, I added one more line: objective complete destruction of Roy Benton, no violence necessary. 3 weeks had passed since I'd started Project 412. 3 weeks of careful documentation, hidden cameras, and playing the submissive stepdaughter while building my arsenal. Saturday night arrived with the usual Texas heat, even at 9:45 p.m. The air thick and suffocating. Roy was drunk again, worse than usual. His veteran buddy had canceled their bar night, leaving him home with a 12-pack and a bad mood. Mom had taken her pills early, escaping to pharmaceutical sleep by 8:30. "Emily," his voice thundered from the garage, "get out here." I saved the document I was working on, activated the recording app on my phone, and walked out slowly. He was standing by his truck, a fresh beer in one hand, garden hose in the other. "Wash it," he slurred, gesturing at the F-150. "The whole thing, by hand, and you better not leave any spots." The scratch I'd made weeks ago had long since been buffed out. But this wasn't about the truck. This was about control, about humiliation. "Roy, it's almost 10 at night. Did I ask for the time?" He stepped closer, beer breath washing over me. "Wash? The truck?" Why, I grabbed the bucket, filled it with soap and water, started washing while he sat in a lawn chair, drinking and watching, making comments about how I couldn't do anything right, how I was useless, how Mom should have raised me better. "You know what your problem is?" He stood up, swaying. "You got no respect. Think you're something special because you can fix cars, but you're nothing. You're less than nothing." I kept washing, my hidden camera catching everything from its position disguised as a phone charger plugged into the garage outlet. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." I turned, and that's when he threw the beer bottle. It missed my head by inches, exploding against the garage wall behind me. Glass shards rained down, and I felt something slice across my arm. "Now look what you made me do," he said, advancing. "Can't even stand still right." He grabbed my wounded arm, squeezing until blood seeped through his fingers. I bit my lip to keep from screaming. "Roy, please." "Shut up. Just shut up." He shoved me backward, and I stumbled, falling against the truck. "You want to threaten me with videos? Think you're smart." My blood went cold. He knew. Somehow, he knew. "I found your little camera," he said, pointing to where I'd hidden one. "Thought you could spy on me in my own house." He grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. "Where are the files? Emily, where did you upload them? I don't know what you're—" The punch to my stomach doubled me over. I gasped, unable to breathe, and he used the moment to drag me toward the truck. "Get up," he snarled. "Get up." I struggled to my feet, and he pushed me against the hood, hand on the back of my neck, pressing my face against the metal. "You're going to delete everything," he said. "Every file, every backup, everything. Or I'll—" That's when his hand hit the truck's panic button on his keys. The alarm exploded into life. That familiar shrieking wail, the flashing lights turning the garage into a strobe-lit nightmare. But this time, it wasn't an accident. The lights illuminated everything Roy holding me down, blood on my arm, the broken bottle, his face twisted with rage. And the dash cam, the one he'd forgotten about in his drunken fury, recording it all. But that wasn't the best part. The alarm was so loud, so piercing, that it triggered something else the smart home system Mom had installed last month. The one that automatically called 911 when it detected breaking glass and a security alarm going off simultaneously. Roy was still shouting, still trying to force me to give up my passwords. When we heard them, sirens, getting closer. "What did you do?" He released me, stumbling backward. "What did you do?" I slid down the truck's side, holding my bleeding arm, and looked up at him. "I didn't do anything. Roy, you did. You threw a bottle. You set off your own alarm. The system Mom installed. It called automatically." His face went white. Red and blue lights were already flashing through the garage windows. "You set me up." "No," I said, pulling out my phone with my good hand. "I just knew that eventually. You'd destroy yourself. I just had to wait. And document everything while I waited." The sirens were right outside now, car doors slamming, footsteps approaching. "Clearwater Police. We got a domestic disturbance call." Roy looked at me, then at the blood on his hands, my blood, then at the broken glass, the running cameras, his truck's dash cam still recording everything. "You bitch," he whispered. "No, Roy," I said as the police appeared in the garage doorway, Seth Coleman among them. "I'm just done being your victim." The alarm was still screaming, lights still flashing, as the officers took in the scene. Me, bleeding on the ground. Roy, standing over me with my blood literally on his hands. The broken bottle. The cameras everywhere. "Sir, step away from her. Now." And as they moved in, as Roy started trying to explain, trying to spin it, I looked at the dash cam and smiled. The alarm had gone off. Just like before. But this time, it wasn't warning me. It was announcing his end. The paramedics bandaged my arm while Roy sat in the back of the patrol car, still trying to explain that this was all a misunderstanding. Seth stood beside me, taking my statement, but his eyes kept flicking to his phone. "The files are uploaded," I said quietly. "Everything's in the folder I shared with you." He nodded. "We'll need the originals for evidence. They're all backed up, multiple locations." I pulled out my phone. "But there's more. And Roy doesn't know about most of it." While the crime scene techs photographed the garage, I started sending, first to Seth's official email, Then to the district attorney's office every video, every audio file, every photograph from the past 3 weeks, the garage beating, the poker night bragging, the Thursday when he'd cornered me in the kitchen and threatened to break every finger if I touched his truck again. But I wasn't done. At 11:15 p.m., I sent a package to Roy's commanding officer from his National Guard unit. The email included recordings of Roy bragging about lying to the VA about his back injury, complete with dates and details. His exact words, "Those idiots at the VA bought every word. Disability check every month for a bar fight injury." At 11:20 p.m., another email went to the VA Inspector General's office. Fraud investigation incoming. At 11:25 p.m., I forwarded the evidence of Roy's affair to my mother's divorce attorney, the one she didn't know she had yet. I'd retained Miranda Chen on her behalf the week before, using the power of attorney Mom had given me for medical emergencies. The lawyer had assured me that Texas was a fault divorce state, and adultery plus domestic violence meant Roy wouldn't get a penny. At 11:30 p.m., I posted on the Clearwater Community Facebook page, not the videos that would be illegal, but a simple message. If you've ever been afraid of reporting domestic violence, please know that the Clearwater Police Department takes it seriously. They responded within minutes tonight when our home security system detected an assault. I'm safe now. You can be too. Within minutes, comments started flooding in. Mrs. Nguyen from next door. We've been worried about you, honey. So glad you're safe. Pete's wife, from Roy's poker game. I told Pete something was wrong in that house. By midnight, the story was spreading through Clearwater like wildfire. Seth walked over, showing me his phone. The DA wants to press maximum charges: assault, family violence, terroristic threats. With your documentation, he's looking at 5 to 10 years. That's not enough, I said. I pulled up another folder on my phone, the one labeled insurance. Saw every photo of every injury, tagged with dates matching Roy's auto insurance claims. 3 accidents in 2 years where he'd claimed injury, collecting thousands in settlements. Except the dates matched days he'd beaten me. The injuries in his claims matched what he'd done to his fists hitting me. Insurance fraud, too. Seth whistled. Emily, this is complete, I said. This is complete. The house felt different when I walked back inside at 1 a.m. Mom was awake, standing in the kitchen in her robe, looking lost. Emily, they said Roy was arrested. I don't understand. I showed her one video. Just one. The garage assault from tonight. She sank into a chair, face white. How long? 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days. I said, I've been documenting for the last 3 weeks and 4 days. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at her, really looked at her. I tried. You told me men and their tempers. You told me not to provoke him. You told me it would blow over. She started crying. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know, I said. And I did know. She was a victim too, in her own way. Miranda Chen will call you tomorrow. She's your divorce attorney. By 3 a.m., I was still awake, watching the numbers climb on my phone. The Facebook post had been shared 200 times. 43 women had messaged me privately, sharing their own stories. The news had picked it up, local veteran arrested in domestic violence case. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Cheryl from Austin, Roy's affair partner, had seen the news. She emailed me directly. I had no idea he was married. I'm sending you everything: emails, texts, photos. He told me he was single, that his ex was crazy. I'm so sorry. Use whatever you need. 342 new pieces of evidence, including emails where Roy detailed his plans to drain the joint bank accounts and leave town with her. I forwarded everything to Miranda, Seth, and the DA. By sunrise, Roy's life was systematically destroyed. Criminal charges filed, VA benefits under investigation, insurance fraud, investigation opened, divorce papers, ready, National Guard conducting review for discharge. His affair exposed, His reputation in Clearwater obliterated. I sat on the front porch, watching the sun come up over Texas, painting the sky the color of fresh bruises. My arm hurt, my ribs ached, but for the first time in 2 years, I could breathe. The district attorney called at 7 a.m. Miss Carter, we've reviewed everything. With your evidence, he's going away for a long time. You've built one of the strongest cases I've ever seen. Good, I said. You should be proud. You did this the right way. Legal, documented, irrefutable. After I hung up, I thought about Roy sitting in his cell, realizing that every camera he didn't know about, every recording he never suspected, every document he thought was private, they were all weapons now, turned against him. He'd thought he was teaching me about power and control. He had, just not the lesson he'd intended. The courthouse interview room was cold and sterile, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. 2 weeks had passed since Roy's arrest, and now came the moment I'd been building toward. The prosecutor wanted me to confront him, to make a victim impact statement with Roy present. His lawyer had convinced him it might help with sentencing if he showed remorse. Roy sat across from me in Orange County jail clothes, hands cuffed to the table, his lawyer beside him, young and nervous. On my side, the prosecutor, Seth in uniform, and my laptop. Roy wouldn't look at me. His eyes stayed fixed on the table, jaw clenched. Mr. Benton, the prosecutor began. Your client requested this meeting to apologize. The floor is yours. Roy's lawyer nudged him. Roy lifted his head slightly, still not meeting my eyes. I lost my temper sometimes. Things got out of hand. That's it, I asked, my voice steady. 2 years of systematic abuse, and you lost your temper sometimes. His eyes flashed up, that familiar anger flickering. You're exaggerating. It wasn't. I opened my laptop and turned it toward him. Let me refresh your memory. The first video started playing. The garage assault. Roy's face on screen, contorted with rage, his belt coming down. The sound of leather hitting flesh echoed in the small room. Stop, his lawyer said. We've seen. No, I said. He needs to see all of it. Next video. Roy bragging to his poker buddies about training me. His laughter as he described my fear. Next. Audio of him threatening to break my fingers. His voice. You think that dash cam matters, I'll destroy every piece of equipment you have. Next. Security footage from the Nguyens showing him dragging me from my car into the house by my hair. 3:22 I'd claimed I was at a friend's. He'd tracked my phone. With each piece of evidence, Roy sank lower in his chair. But here's my favorite, I said, clicking on the last file. It was from tonight, recorded on my phone as I waited outside. The video showed Roy from an hour ago, in the jail, talking to another inmate, not knowing he was being recorded by security cameras. She set me up, that bitch. When I get out, I'll show her what real fear looks like. His lawyer's face went white. The prosecutor smiled grimly. Terroristic threats from jail, the prosecutor said. That's new charges, Mr. Benton. Your 5 to 10 just became 10 to 20. Roy lunged forward, chains rattling. You destroyed my life. No, I said, standing up, calm as ice. You destroyed your life. I just documented it. You said I scratched your truck, I continued, packing up my laptop. You beat me for a scratch. You broke my ribs, bruised my body, tried to break my spirit. Which one's worse? Roy. He was breathing hard now, face red, looking like he wanted to come across the table at me even with the chains. His lawyer was desperately trying to calm him. The VA called today, I added, pausing at the door. Full fraud investigation. Turns out they really don't like when someone steals disability benefits. That's federal prison. Roy, after you serve your state time. You vindictive little. Also, I cut him off. Cheryl from Austin. She's pressing charges too. Turns out you stole money from her. She has receipts. Seth stood, hand on his service weapon as Roy started struggling against his restraints. One more thing, I said. Mom's divorce lawyer found your hidden account, the one in Oklahoma you thought nobody knew about. $28,000 you stole from our household. That's community property. Roy, Mom gets half of everything, plus damages. The sound that came from Roy wasn't quite human. Pure rage, pure defeat, all rolled into one primal roar. And that's when it happened. The jail's security alarm went off. Not because of any emergency, but because Roy's thrashing had triggered the violence sensor in his restraints. The sharp electronic wail filled the room, red lights flashing. I stood there, watching him struggle as guards rushed in, as the alarm screamed, as those lights painted his face in alternating moments of harsh exposure and shadow, just like that night in the garage, just like the moment everything changed. The alarm, I said, loud enough for him to hear over the chaos. It's almost poetic, isn't it? Every time an alarm goes off around you, you lose a little more. First your freedom, now your future, next your dignity. The guards were restraining him now, preparing to drag him back to his cell. His lawyer was backing away, already calculating how to drop this client. "Emily!" Roy screamed as they pulled him toward the door. "Emily!" I turned to look at him one last time. This man who'd terrorized me, who'd made me small, who'd thought he owned me. "You asked which was worse," I said. "The scratch on your truck or what you did to me. The answer is neither. The worst thing was teaching me that I had the power to destroy you, and that I'd be really, really good at it." The door slammed shut. The alarm finally went silent. But the echo of it, like Roy's future, stretched on into nothing. Seth walked me out. "You know he's never getting out now, not after that display." "I know," I said. "How does it feel?" I thought about it as we walked into the Texas sunlight, like the alarm finally stopped ringing. The sun was just breaking over the highway at 6:45 a.m., painting the Texas sky in shades of gold and orange. I drove with the windows down, letting the morning air whip through my hair as I crossed the bridge leading out of Clearwater. My old Honda hummed steadily beneath me, packed with boxes containing everything I wanted to keep from the house on 412 Maple Street. The radio crackled to life with the morning news. In local news, Roy Benton, the Clearwater veteran arrested last month on multiple charges including domestic assault, insurance fraud, and VA benefit fraud, has been sentenced to 18 years in federal prison following his state sentence of 12 years. The case has sparked conversation about domestic violence in military families. I reached over and turned off the radio. I didn't need to hear the rest. I'd been there for every moment of it. Mom was staying with her sister in Houston, finally free to start therapy, finally free to heal. The house would be sold. Roy's truck had already been repossessed by the bank after the fraud investigations froze his assets. That precious F-150 he'd loved more than people, gone to auction. I'd gotten a text from Seth that morning. Jury came back on all counts. Guilty across the board. He'll be in his 70s when he gets out, if he lives that long. Justice. Cold. Complete. Documented justice. The shop had given me a raise and a promotion to head mechanic. Turns out, when you make national news as a survivor who fought back the smart way, people respect that. Women had been bringing their cars specifically to me, wanting to support someone who'd stood up, who'd refused to be broken. But I wasn't staying in Clearwater. Too many memories, too many ghosts. I had a job lined up in Colorado at a restoration shop that specialized in classic cars. A fresh start in a place where nobody knew my story, where I could just be Emily the mechanic, not Emily the survivor. My phone buzzed with a voice message from Mom. "Drive safe, baby. I'm proud of you. So proud." As I drove, I thought about that night in the garage, about the alarm that had started everything, how something so sharp and jarring had become the sound of my awakening. Roy had thought he was punishing me for scratching his truck. Instead, he'd scratched away the fear that had kept me silent. The morning sun climbed higher, warming my face through the windshield, In my rearview mirror, Clearwater grew smaller and smaller until it was just a dot on the horizon, then nothing at all. My phone, mounted on the dashboard, showed a notification, another message from a woman who'd read my story, asking how she could document her own situation, how she could build her own Project 412. I'd answered dozens of these in the past weeks, maybe hundreds. I pulled over at a rest stop, opened my laptop, and logged into the website I'd created, project412.org, resources for documentation. Legal contacts by state, a forum for survivors to share strategies. Everything I'd learned, everything that had saved me, available for anyone who needed it. The tagline at the top read, "When the alarm goes off, you have two choices, freeze or fight smart. Choose smart." Already, 47 women had posted their success stories, 47 abusers facing consequences, 47 alarms that had become sirens of justice. I closed the laptop and got back on the road. The highway stretched ahead, endless and full of possibility. No more walking on eggshells. No more measuring my words. No more making myself small. The sun was fully up now, bright and clear. A perfect Texas morning. I turned on the radio again, found a classic rock station, and turned it up loud. The kind of loud that would have earned me a backhand just months ago. But Roy was in a federal holding facility, awaiting transport to begin his 30-year sentence. And I was driving toward mountains I'd never seen, with skills that were mine, money that was mine, and a future that was entirely my own. The last text I'd sent him, through his lawyer, had been simple. "You taught me that actions have consequences. Thank you for the lesson." He'd tried to respond, but I'd already blocked every possible avenue of communication. He was nothing now, not even worth the space in my rearview mirror. The speedometer read 75. The mile markers flew by. Texas gave way to New Mexico. The landscape changed, opened up, breathed. Somewhere behind me, in a concrete cell, a man who'd thought he owned me was learning what it meant to be powerless. And somewhere ahead, in a mountain town I'd only seen in pictures, a new life was waiting. I pressed harder on the accelerator, chasing the horizon, leaving the alarms behind. The only sound now was the engine, the wind, and freedom. Pure, documented, perfectly executed freedom. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was intense, but these stories need to be told. If you're listening to this right now, whether you're driving to work, sitting at home, or maybe finding strength in your own situation, I'd love to know where in the world you are. Please comment below and let's connect. You're not alone in this. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Your comments mean everything, and you never know who might need to hear that they're not the only one going through something similar. Stay strong, document everything, and remember, when that alarm goes off in your life, you have the power to make it mean something different.